Hello and welcome to another episode of Historic Hindsight. I'm John, that's Tom, and today we're going to talk to you about molasses.
Molasses. I think we got mole and an asses, but molasses, kind of the same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah,
so
sure.
That's what I said.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
What we're going to talk about, Johnny, is we're going to talk about the good old days when government regulation in building codes did not exist.
Yeah.
And
yes, God, thank goodness.
ramifications
I bet,
of that.
I mean, probably not. Probably maximizing profits and pay for the workers because you don't have to pay for safety things and stuff like that. So nothing but good, likely. I mean, this was when Air America was at its greatest. What year are we at?
Or maybe the worst disaster, or one of the worst disasters in Boston history for a very long time. But, it's okay. It's fine. Yeah. 1919, Johnny. We're right at the end, just
19,
right after the end of the World War One. What essentially happened is the molasses tank kind of ruptured.
19 what?
Killing a couple of people. So how does that even happen, right?
Yeah, but 19 what? It's the 1920s? 1919. Oh, okay. I just heard 19, and I didn't think you finished the year.
Oh, I did. 1919.
Okay.
So, it's Boston, Johnny. We're just after the Great War. The molasses industry is booming because during the war, believe it or not, molasses is a primary ingredient in munitions because, it creates ethanol, and you can do a lot of fun stuff with ethanol in the military industry.
Really?
Industrial complex.
Huh.
So, yeah, molasses was kind of a big booming industry.
Okay.
So,
I had no idea.
in 1915, it's such a lucrative business that the Purity Distilling Company operated on 529 Commercial Street in Boston's North End, predominantly a lower immigrant class area of Boston. You think of your Boston Irish. Yeah, that's where a lot of the Boston Irish were from.
Okay.
They decide that they are going to sell their lucrative business to the United States Industrial Alcohol Company that's going to build a $30,000 holding tank for molasses at their plant. Their plant lays right off of a main road, right next to the elevated rail platform, so easy access in and out of the city for employees, easy access for shipping of said goods, and they're right on the harbor, the Boston Harbor, so you're easy shipments of molasses to the facility, to the holding facility, where it can be distributed across the town to where it goes for actual final refining. It's a pretty good, logical idea. This tank is going to be a 50-foot tall, 90-foot wide, cylinder tank. Ooh. Just think of what you think of a tank.
Big old fat tank.
It is the largest building, or will be the largest building in the predominant area. So this is a massive feat of construction here. It will hold 2.3 million gallons of molasses that will be distributed to USIA's distilling facility in East Cambridge. And it makes perfect sense for you to do that. And that is going to be the only thing in our story that's going to make perfect sense. Because everything else after this point is pure shenanigans.
Okay, but they did get the tank built. They picked a cheap spot in an area with good transportation and everything, built a giant tank, presumably set up the factory where they have the workers come in and fill it up, transport whatever, fill up. Are they just dripping it into molasses trucks or what, like barrels? What? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a big holding facility. It gets put into like rail cars. It gets shipped over to East Cambridge, where it gets sent to where you actually take the molasses and you refine it into ethanol. Whether that's
surely not
drinking
just
ethanol
a
or
rail car just
bang bang
loose. Ethanol. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, but not just loose in a car. They have tanks and stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's like a tanker. It's like an oil tanker, but instead of oil, it's molasses. Yeah.
It's more fun if you just imagine it as loose molasses in a train.
But we got to start with the building of said tank. We know what they want to build. They're going to spend $30,000 on it.
So it's not built. Okay.
It's not built yet. $30,000 by today's standards is actually $800,000. So it's not a completely cheap building, but not a super expensive building either.
No, not for one that's going to have such lucrative, such a lucrative hub. That's going to be paid back.
Good investment. Now, it's 1915, and there are no building codes for tanks. Like if you build a commercial
there are
building,
codes.
there are
building
building
codes
codes, and
exist,
you have to like actually be a contractor to build said building. But this isn't a building; this is a structure, and does not fall under any building codes.
Of course not. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense if it did. It doesn't have rooms. It doesn't have doors. It doesn't have to have a certain number of studs.
But it is holding 2.3 million gallons or something, so it might be important for it to not leak and be structurally sound. But
of course. But Tommy, the people who are building it are going to make sure it doesn't leak and that it's structurally sound because their money's tied up in it. So of course they're going to take care of it. They don't need to be told how to do things safely and correctly. Do they?
Sure. And Johnny, who's going to build this? Well, it goes to the lowest bidder, like most things do worldwide.
Of course.
The problem here is the lowest bidder is Arthur P. Gell, who's a financial advisor who has never built anything in his life ever. He just sees this as a quick.
He saw it's a good investment, like we said.
You're going to pay me $30,000. I'll build it for $15,000. Problem solved. The other big hiccup here, though,
how hard can
not
it
only
be?
Is that Arthur here is not an engineer. He's also given a very tight deadline because once Arthur agrees to build the structure, they've already got a massive 700,000 gallon shipment of molasses coming in. So it's like you're kind of it's got to be built for when this boat comes in.
All right, so so they ran into that situation where what is it? You can have it built cheaply.
Yeah.
You can have it built quickly. Or you can have it built correctly.
You can have two of those three things, but not
two
of
those or whatever,
and
the other one's going to be skewed in a crazy direction. So that's what they ran into, and they had to get it done quickly with somebody who didn't know what he was doing. But he was going to hire it out anyway. He's not the one building it. He's not going out there and hammering it in the sides, but doesn't know how to run a construction crew or pick a head or anything. I'm sure. They have to do it quickly and cheaply, and it's not going to be done well then.
And so that quickly part is you got to do two of the three. You got to have all three. So they got to cut some corners. And one of the big corners that they cut is safety testing. We don't need to.
Didn't test it.
So their idea of testing is filling the tank 6 inches of water. Keep in mind, the tank is 50 feet tall. And they put 6 inches of water in the tank. And they go, didn't leak. You must
so you good. Know that the bottom 6 inches of your tank is fine, which was that, and the weight, obviously the outward force of 2 point whatever tons of molasses,
2.3
surely won't put any stress. Million gallons, whatever.
To put it in concept of weight here, a gallon of water weighs around 8 pounds, roughly, a little over, and a gallon of molasses weighs about 11.5 pounds. So testing it even with water makes no
45% more. Yeah.
And
testing it doesn't matter what you test. If you tested it with 6 inches of like the world's densest liquid or whatever, it wouldn't matter. You're not testing the tank.
No, you're not testing it.
That's
well, Johnny, the tank's built.
But to be fair, I mean, water's expensive and it would take a long time.
Yeah, that 700,000 gallon tanker's there, and they start filling up.
Yep.
They start filling up the new molasses tank, and it instantly.
Got it done before the shipment. That's good.
It instantly begins to leak molasses out of the rivets.
Where?
Out of all the rivets. It's a big tank that's riveted together. It's a big metal tank.
Yeah.
But
I'll bet it wasn't leaking out the bottom.
Leak out of the rivets. So bad so that the local children, the immigrant children, would actually go with cups and collect the molasses and bring it home to mommy, where she could make them some sweet treats. Because
oh, that's nice. I used to do that. Yeah, I used to do that. My buddy lived in a house that backed up to a cornfield, and I went out one time and collected a bunch of corn for my mom. Stole from a farmer, basically, and got it back. And then she told me what the difference was between feed corn and sweet corn.
And sweet corn.
And I just stole senselessly from a farmer.
Well, these kids were actually stealing it. So, the USIA does the reasonable thing and goes ahead and finds a paint color that matches the color of molasses and paints the tanker molasses color.
So it's not. I mean, obviously, it's not spraying out
No,
like
it's
water would because it's
seeping.
molasses. It's a
molasses
slow.
seeping.
It's seeping out like it would out of a tree if you tapped a tree.
Yes,
basically.
Yeah, they just
And they'd go up, they'd get a cup, and so they just tried to camouflage the molasses coming out in hopes that people would stop getting it, or
Stealing
maybe
molasses.
the next inspector coming by would be like, I don't see anything wrong with this. That looks all the same color.
yeah, pretty.
That was
Well,
brilliant.
the tank miraculously does hold for 3 years like this, and it wasn't until January
3
15th,
years?
1919, that the catastrophe, so to speak, happens.
Oh no.
So leading
There
up,
she blows.
leading up to January 15th, the temperatures in Boston are a balming 0 degrees. So everything is below freezing, like one would expect in a Boston.
Like a lot. 0 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yes, Fahrenheit, not Celsius. Yeah, Fahrenheit.
Yep.
The USAIA was expecting a shipment of molasses coming in that was to be delivered on the 14th. And they thought, in order to speed up the whole delivery process of getting it from the shipping container into the storage container, they would heat up said molasses, because if you've ever cooked with molasses, you know when it's there's that expression, slow as molasses. When it's cold, molasses doesn't move.
I mean, molasses doesn't move very fast. Warm.
No.
And I was gonna say it must be a very frustrating job to be a molasses deliverer or tanker that accepts it, because how long does it take to drain?
Oh, it's got to be forever. Especially like 700
thousands of
billion
gallons or hundreds of gallons or whatever of molasses.
Yeah.
Oh, so they try to heat it?
Yeah, they heat it. No, they don't try to heat it. The tanker's heated. The molasses that's going into the tank is heated. So they've got like around 500,000 gallons of molasses going in. And it's already got.
And they have heaters for this.
Cold molasses that's in the tank already. So now you got hot molasses that's being
adding to hot to cold,
put into cold, and we know what thermal things do. Now, Johnny, you used to brew beer. I used to brew beer, when you're making beer, you can make a molasses beer. That's how you make rum, is with molasses. And the first step in doing that is to heat molasses up, introduce yeast, and then you get fermentation. And in the age of 1919, where sanitation is top-notch, read Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, you learn pretty quickly that wild yeast is probably pretty prevalent in these shipping containers. So when you're heating the molasses up,
activating,
you're probably
yeast.
activating the wild yeast, and you're going to go ahead and start the fermentation process.
Now, Tommy, what happens with fermentation?
You get a little pressure, Johnny. And you want to know how I know you get a little pressure? Johnny, actually, you tell the story. What happens with fermentation when you get pressure?
I also know. Yeah, so I didn't let a IPA cool enough before I started the fermentation process and put the little lid on, had a little bubbler, but even my little bubbler wasn't enough. And the next day, I opened my closet door because I smelled some fermenting stuff, and it had exploded everywhere. Popped the lid off and got all over the clothes, all over the shoes, all over the walls, all over the carpet. Now that was a small mess. What happened in this big old tank of molasses, Tommy?
Well, Johnny, a similar thing happened.
Did they have a bubbler?
You're not cooling off that molasses. It's fermenting, and you're putting it on top of cold molasses. You pair that up with the very next day on January 15th, the temperature spiked from 0 degrees to 40 degrees, and we are now in a prime zone of whoopsie doodle. Local reports say that around noon, they started hearing what they heard or thought were gunshots. And what they were really hearing was the rivets just boo, boo, boo.
Oh man! So this is a giant molasses tank after Thanksgiving dinner. Like, its buttons are popping off its pants. It's full. Its belly's gurgling, boiling, churning. Oh,
yeah, at 12:30, those rivets they're no longer holding, and the tank ruptures. Yep. And now you have a 25-foot high tidal wave of warm molasses ramming right into the elevated train track that was sitting right next to the tanker there, and that knocks that over. That's gone. Good news there is that the train that just passed had just passed, so at least time to shut down so nobody's driving off. But you still have a 25-foot tidal wave of molasses crushing into the
had to have
North
moved so quickly
Boston neighborhoods of
time.
just the poor immigrant neighborhoods where, unfortunately, 2 to 3 feet of molasses is what winds up settling in that neighborhood, and you have a bit of a conundrum. It is estimated that the tidal wave was flowing at 35 miles per hour. So imagine the force behind that, though, that you got molasses moving at the speed of 35 miles an hour.
35 miles an hour.
And then it's the weight
it's
of
like
molasses.
A bear.
Yeah, the weight of molasses crushing into everything. Really does
the stickiness.
does a prime job of damage.
You're not if you get buried in molasses, you're not just standing up out of it.
No, you're fighting the whole time.
Like a pool. Like it's gonna be a lot. I feel
the first responders
in a bed of molasses some mornings.
The first responders on the scene, Johnny, are 116 cadets from the USS Nantucket, where they rushed to the scene and tried to rescue who they could. A lot of them promptly getting stuck themselves because it's molasses.
It's molasses.
The Red Cross.
How do you clean this up?
Well, we'll get there. The Red Cross, police departments, and fire departments respond. Again, many of them becoming victims themselves when they get stuck in the molasses because it's molasses. Doctors have to make an impromptu hospital to treat the wounded in nearby buildings. And all witness would report that, well, the sweet, bittery smell of molasses gives off not so much of a sweet, bittery smell when mixed with the drowning victims.
Yeah.
So
this is like on Parks and Rec where they have like the bakery fire. And 20 people died or whatever, but it smelled. So the whole town smelled like toast.
Well, the whole town is smelling like molasses, Johnny. And we got a casualty report. You ready for the casualty report?
Oh, jeez, I don't think so.
All in all, 21 are going to die. The youngest of which being 10 years old.
I mean, he got swallowed up. A 10-year-old can't find out.
He had no chance. No chance.
Not a
10-year-old kid's only about 3 feet tall anyway. So yeah, he's definitely miserable way to.
Miserable.
So 150 are going to be injured. Of those injured, 119 residents are actually going to instantly file a class action lawsuit against the USIA because they should.
Seems fair. Yes, that's
USIA.
I'm lawsuit happy, but that seems like an opportune time to maybe.
Yeah, it's an opportune time. It's actually going to be their very first class action lawsuit in Massachusetts history. So, again, I feel like this is a class action lawsuit that's warranted. Merited. Yeah, it's very much warranted. Yeah. The USIA is going to claim that they were victims of terrorism and said that their tank was blown up by anarchists that were mad that their product was being used in munitions. Now, there's actually 2 problems with their comments here. First is that the munitions end of the molasses business is kind of wound down because it's 1919 and the war it's been over for a minute now, so... Yeah. I mean, not long. It's been over for a month, or 2 months, but still.
Yeah, but that's kind of a late-term activist going after the
war's over.
Like, they would have gone to the height.
Yeah, you would have thought. And the other big problem with that is that, there are countless witnesses that just watch that tank rupture. They watch those rivets pop. They attested to the fact that this tank had been leaking for 3 years and no.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like they didn't build a big enough tank to cover up their crime. They needed one 2 to 3 times as big so they could have, got rid of all the witnesses too.
Right.
And flood that town with 6 feet of molasses and see how many people are filing a class action lawsuit against you.
And independent investigation is going to find out that those claims are, full of bullshit. It was not blown up at all. It ruptured due to not being built to. Well, I would say not being built to code, but there were no codes, so fuck it. It was not being built sufficient enough to handle it.
I would say that, and also improper maintenance, because likely the rivets started popping. They have sugary liquid inside. They're gonna start rusting, rotting, rusting,
Oh
whatever.
yeah, it was leaking from the
away.
day one of them filling it up. Like, and they
And-
they didn't fix it. They're like, well, just paint it.
And
Fine, let it leak.
good enough.
In any case, Johnny, it's going to lead to one of the longest lawsuit trials in all of Massachusetts history. So we've got that.
Even longer than the witch trials, huh?
3 years is how long it lasts. Yeah, it's actually longer than the witch trials. It lasts 3 years.
yeah.
The company is actually
Well,
going to be
they
held
didn't take long to figure
liable,
that out.
Johnny, for a change. They are held liable, but they are actually
Wow.
only fined $628,000 in damages, which is equivalent to $9.8 million today, but that's $9.8 million of today's money when it was estimated that it was more like $10 million in their money then of damages.
Yeah.
So
So basically, what happened was a company was found guilty, but they got a little slap on the wrist and said, "Oh, don't do that again. And if you do, you'll also pay a small fine and be allowed to continue to operate."
Yeah, each relative that was killed does receive $7,000, which is like $110,000 a day, but that doesn't really seem like enough.
That's not enough.
For
That's not nearly enough. No, I'm sorry. If my 10-year-old drowns in molasses and dies, $110,000 is not going to be the compensation that I need.
that you would want. No, and Johnny, you mentioned cleanup earlier. Let's talk about the cleanup. It is going to take 6 long months to clean up the molasses at a cost of equivalent to $100 million in today's money. So again, $100 million in today's money is not exactly fair that they were only fined $628,000 in then money.
And they didn't. They of course didn't have to cover the cost.
No,
of
they don't
that
have to cover the
cleanup,
cost of
I'm
that.
Sure
No,
that
no,
was
no.
on
That's-
the state
that's
or
the
city
taxpayers that
or
are-
a
yeah,
combination
that's-
of all the different. Yeah.
The cleanup was made worse because everyone going into the area to clean up is stepping in molasses and then tracking that through the whole city as they go home.
I mean, what do you? What? You
How they
can't do
cleaned it
anything
up-
else. Like what?
How they
Waffles?
actually cleaned it up, Johnny, is they would get salt water, put it in fire trucks, and then hose down the streets with saltwater fire hoses, and then hose
Yeah.
that into the Boston Harbor.
So they didn't clean it
No,
up.
they just dumped it into the
made
harbor.
They made it an SEP, somebody else's problem. That's okay.
That's great, right? It will spur on.
I'm guessing that
massive-
had no impact on the local wildlife.
I'm sure it had
population.
none on it at all. It will spur on new building regulations, such as you can no longer build a structure of that size for industrial use next to a freaking residential community where it has the potential of rupturing and killing a bunch of people.
So it killed the farming industry in downtown Boston, is what you're telling me?
Maybe. So
Because like they can't build their silos and shit. Like so, I mean, is that
Well,
why
I
you
mean-
don't see farms in downtown Boston?
maybe
Not a
not.
lot
Why
of-
you don't see farms in downtown Boston.
I'm sure that's the reason.
So yeah, that's and a fun note is that allegedly on warm days, Bostonians said up until recent history that it would still smell like molasses on the north end, which I mean, let's be fair, it's possible, I guess. It's that shit. There's no way they got it all cleaned up ever, and it's just
I mean, no, but the aromatics in the molasses are gonna be toast.
so. If you're ever
after this
walking
long.
around, if you ever are walking around Boston's north end, going to the Boston Harbor, and you start smelling sweet molasses, you might know why now.
That's it for this week in Historic Hindsight. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review, and join us next week when we talk about the Battle of Stones River.